Welcome back. Lori Horton from A Celebration by Lori joins us in the studio to teach us how to make some circus animal sugar cookies. Good morning.
Good morning. How are we this morning?
Oh, good. It's
Woo,
Monday.
It's Monday.
Always
tell you
here in the studio. You know
always,
that,
always. We're used to that, right?
Yes.
We roll with it. This one is a really fun one that we're going to do today. So if you're a fan of the little frosted circus animal
nostalgic,
cookies,
yes.
they're so fun. The classic pink and white, very colorful sprinkles. These are very similar, and it's going to be a really nice, soft, chewy cookie.
Oh, delicious.
Almost somewhere between the texture of a sugar cookie and a snickerdoodle. So they've got that little bit more cakey texture. You can make them really nice and thick and fat. So we're going to start with a pretty basic batter this morning.
Okay.
But we have our butter that is softened, just kind of room temperature. We're going to add to that some white sugar. One that's a little out of the ordinary in a cookie recipe, but a little bit of powdered sugar.
Oh.
And some brown sugar. So we want to make sure these are really nice and sweet.
Why powdered sugar for this recipe?
It goes back to that texture.
Okay.
And when we get to our dry ingredients, this has a little bit of cream of tartar in it as well, which is going to let them rise really thick, but stay chewy.
Yes, delicious.
So it's going to be a good one. We're going to cream this together just a little bit. Let me make a little noise. Make sure we get that butter really creamy. Just takes a second, but we want to incorporate all of the sugars. And then we're going to add to that a whole egg and just an egg yolk. So not 2 whole eggs, just the egg and the egg yolk. And then a little bit of vanilla and almond.
Ooh.
Again, just a really good combination.
Delicious.
And when we get to the end, we're going to add a little white chocolate on top. That almond is going to bring that out. So good. Totally worth it. So we're going to cream that on in.
Okay.
Make sure it's really nice and fluffy looking. So give it just a little mix here. And then you can come back with your spatula. Make sure you don't have any little bits. You don't need to do a real high speed here, just go easy.
Is over mixing something that you need to worry about with this?
A little bit, don't go crazy. And you could certainly do this by hand. It's just a little easier to cream those ingredients with the mixer.
Yeah.
So what we end up with is just a nice, typical fluffy sort of beginning of our wet ingredients for any kind of a cookie dough. So make sure you clean those edges, get all of that incorporated. And then we're going to set that bowl aside for just a minute, and we're going to just lightly put together our dry ingredients. So this is just flour, nothing out of the ordinary, plain all-purpose flour. You don't need to go to cake flour or anything like that.
Perfect.
And then, as I said, a little cream of tartar and a little baking soda.
Just like that snickerdoodle you were mentioning, because you used that in there.
So we're going to whisk those dry ingredients together, make sure that's a little incorporated, and then slowly combine the two before we get ready to bake them. And then a little bit of tips on that when we come back.
All right, sounds good. Well, we don't want to miss it. Stick around. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back. Lori is back in the studio this morning. She's sharing with us her recipe for circus animal sugar cookies.
Yes.
All right. So what were the last tips that we did?
Well, we started out with our dough, and this one is kind of basic in some respects, but a little bit different. So we talked about earlier how this dough is kind of between a sugar cookie and like a snickerdoodle consistency. It's very cakey. It's a nice, thick, chewy cookie.
Right.
And the way that we achieved that was we started with creaming our wet ingredients, that butter, all of our sugars, the flavors, the eggs. And then in those dry ingredients, we added a little bit of cream of tartar.
Yes.
And baking soda. So that's kind of that unusual combination.
Okay.
And this is where it comes down to all of us bakers are a little bit of mad scientists because we have to get those chemical reactions perfect to get that finished product to come out. And you cannot substitute baking soda, baking powder, not interchangeable for the record. If a recipe calls for those specific ingredients and you don't have them, you aren't making it.
Yeah.
So you just need to remember that they are there for a very important reason on how they rise and the consistency of the dough.
Important reminder there.
So once we got those ingredients creamed and we mixed those dry ones together, then we incorporated them fully. And what I've got is, I know it's a little bit hard to tell, but it's a nice dough and it's fairly stiff. So I can put that spatula in there, but it's still pretty easy for me to finish incorporating that just by hand. So what really makes these the fun circus animal cookies is we've got to put a few sprinkles in the batter.
Yes, this classic sprinkles.
So these are just the little nonpareils. There's little bitty tiny little sugar pieces. You can get them in different color combinations. I used kind of the little pastel ones here. And I'm just going to fold a few of those in before I scoop my dough out.
So not too much.
Not a lot.
Okay.
They're kind of hard and crunchy even after they are baked.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
you don't want to go too much with them. Some people love that. That's their favorite part of it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of on the fence there, so I like to keep them at a minimum so you can see them, but you don't have to crunch on them.
Sure.
And then keep in mind that this is going to make big cookies. So you'll see my ones out here on the tray. This recipe is literally going to do, of my nice big cookie scoop, 10 cookies.
Oh, perfect.
Like
yeah.
exactly 10. So you want to give these some space on your cookie sheet, and you want to use a parchment lined cookie sheet like we usually do. Just makes that cleanup easier.
Yes.
But it also makes these bake a little more evenly.
So they'll spread out a good amount.
They'll spread out a
Okay.
decent chunk. And what I want to point out to you, and I just did this kind of so we could show the difference. This is a recipe that recommends that you press your dough a little
Oh,
bit
sure.
before you bake it. So I actually did one pan that I pressed down, and I did one pan that I left just exactly like this,
yeah.
straight out of the scoop. And the difference is pretty easy to see if
Oh, for
you
sure.
guys can see the difference
Yes.
in the size, but mainly in the difference in the height. If you can look at them sideways, this one stayed much thicker in there, so it's
Right.
a little gooey in the middle. This one baked a little more evenly.
Okay. Yeah,
So, you know,
for sure.
personal preference a little bit on that, but we'll bust those open in our next segment so you can really see the inside.
All right, sounds like a plan. Stick around, we'll be right back. Alrighty, well, Lori is just going to show us the last
Yes.
few steps for these delicious looking
Just those-
circus animal sugar cookies.
Yeah, those finishing touches, right? We always have to do that. And I just wanted to go ahead and scoop these out and point out, this is like literally about exactly 10
Yes.
dough balls with that nice big cookie scoop. But when we talk about pressing them down, we don't want to flatten them out, but just give them a nice light flatten on top, you know, not too much. So they're still going to be really thick, but you just want to even them out a little bit and kind of get rid of that doming. So
Yes.
just to kind of clarify on that. And with the flattened out ones, I baked them for just a little bit less. So this pan that I flattened out, I did about 8 minutes.
Okay.
Whereas when I baked the first batch, they really went about 9. So
Okay.
our recipe will say up to 10, and that does depend a little bit on the weather. So
Right,
I just
of
did these
course.
last night. So that's kind of where we're at right now with this in between a little bit. So
wonderful.
once they've baked, they're going to come out of the oven. They're going to have a really nice golden brown to the bottom. And I always point this out because nobody ever appreciate the bottom of a cookie.
Yes, you have
You guys, when
to.
you turn those over and it's just like perfection golden brown, you want to
Yes.
turn. You just want to leave them that
Oh,
way.
it looks so good.
So when they are at that point, and you'll see a little bit of browning around the edges, and they'll lose that shine in the middle. That's how you know they're done. So you're going to let them cool completely, because our last step to really get that animal cookie frosted look to them is we're going to dip them in a little bit of just white chocolate.
Yes.
And you can tint some of your white chocolate pink if you want to. Make sure you use a gel color or an oil-based color.
Right, because it'll like mix
It'll
and get
seize
hardened.
up,
And
yeah. Or you can actually even buy, you know, pre-colored
Oh, sure.
white chocolate
Yeah.
as well. So that makes it easy. If you're doing a bunch, that's the way to go. These are great with, you know, some of your Christmas cookie exchanges. They're kind of fun because they
Oh,
get a
how-
little color
yes.
in there.
Fun for the kids too,
For the
sure.
kids. So you're going to dip those in a little bit of white chocolate, and if you've worked with white chocolate before, you know it can be a little bit thick. You'll add a little bit of oil to that.
Okay.
It can be vegetable oil, coconut oil, kind of whatever you have on hand.
Does the taste influence it at all?
I don't think that
Okay.
it does. Maybe I'm just not that sophisticated with my palate. I taste the white chocolate. It's sweet.
Sure.
It's delicious.
Yeah, perfect.
But just go gently. So, you know, about a teaspoon at a time, depending on how much you're melting. If you get too much, it doesn't set back up well.
Okay.
It kind of stays sticky. So you'll just put a little bit of that on there. You can actually dip them or spread it, and then add some more of your sprinkles. Put an actual little animal cookie on top like we've done here. But what I wanted to do here is actually, I should have grabbed a knife so this would be nice and clean, but I wanted to crack one of each of these open so you
Oh,
can kind of
yeah.
see, and it'll be a little bit hard to tell on camera, but again, you can kind of see a little bit more doughy, gooey in there, which is delicious. But it just depends on your preference. So this one is almost, my mom tasted these yesterday and she compared it was perfect to almost like a cake pop.
Oh, absolutely.
A little more of
Especially
that.
with that like coating on top.
Exactly.
For sure.
She said this kind of has more of a cake pop texture, where this one gives you more of that cakey cookie. So it's just kind of personal preference, I really think, but that's how you'll know. If you like that cake pop texture, leave those cookies domed up just out of your scoop. If you want a little bit more of that cakey snickerdoodle type texture, give them a light press and bake them a little bit less.
Yeah, we're trying both for
Or
sure.
both, absolutely.
All right. Well, Lori, thanks so much for being with us this morning. Stick around. We're back with more right after this.